Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1040B, and today's date is August 4th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Election Systems to be Treated as Critical Infrastructure During a Cyber Attack. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, a couple reports ago, we talked about GMO foods, and Obama signed the legislation that requires manufacturers of genetically modified food to provide labeling of their products. And we talked about all the different problems of this bill S764. And once again, we as a people, we have a right to know what is in the food, what we're putting into our bodies. Is it safe for us? We're adults. We can make the decision what is good and what is not good. But this is not what it's about. It's about keeping certain corporations in business, making a profit, and hiding the facts from the people. That's really what it's all about. And also, there are other agendas: infertility, poisoning, keeping us obese, and other things. But there are problems with this, and we know that this bill is not going to require the manufacturers to put a text type of form of labeling on the products. They'll have to use like maybe a QR code or something like that. Another problem with the bill is its lax standards of broad definitions. For example, the bill stipulates that if a majority of products contain meat, it need not be labeled as containing GM ingredients. Very interesting. Now, the two lawmakers who crafted the bill, Debbie Stabenow and Pat Roberts, they are direct beneficiaries of lobbyists. Stabenow's sixth largest donor in 2016 was Dow Chemical, which coincidentally lobbied for S764 passage. Stabenow's other donors include Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase and Company. Stabenow accepted more money from agribusiness political action committees in 2016 than from any other industry PACs. So you can see right now that these individuals, they are in the pockets of these corporations. And this is something that we really need to change in America. These lobbyists, what the senators, representatives can accept, they should not be allowed to accept any money from central banks, from corporations, or anything like that to fund their campaign. Each individual should be blocked from accepting any type of funds. Because once our representatives, our president, our senators, once they take the funds, the corporations, those individuals, they have them. And once that individual is elected into office, guess what? Those corporations, they come running and saying, okay, you owe us now. We have these laws that we've written up, and we want you to back them. And this doesn't benefit the people. It benefits the corporations once again. And all of this should not be in our government. The government is there to support the people, to do everything in their best interest for the people, what the people want. And what corporations want and what people want are two different things. And we can see right now that our government right now is completely corrupt. At this point, they all need to be removed and replaced. Now, the situation in Ukraine has gone from bad to worse. We see the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe said that one of its monitors were threatened at gunpoint in eastern Ukraine. And this was at a Kiev checkpoint. And the special monitoring mission, they were stopped by armed men military-style clothing with no markings at a known Ukrainian army position. And one of the SMM monitors stepped out of the vehicle to speak with the man, and the individual that was dressed in military-style clothing chambered around into his machine gun, put his finger on the trigger, and told this group to leave this area. Now, it's apparent they don't want them to see what's going on in certain areas near the contact line. And what we're seeing right now is that Kiev, they reject negotiations with Donbass altogether. And it looks like right now that the political dialogue as part of the Minsk negotiation is actually blocked by the Ukrainian side, which we knew for a very long time. There's no law on the special status, on the constitutional reform, on the elections, and on the amnesty of the southeastern people. And it does look like right now that all of this is off the table, and it looks like Ukraine will be going to war once again. And this is a situation we need to watch. And if we really think about it, the United States right now is bombing many of the countries in the Middle East. They're getting ready to start war in Ukraine, and they're provoking North Korea, China in the South Pacific. They are really pushing the idea for war at this point. We see the UN member states, they have rejected a UN proposal to resettle 10% of the world's refugees annually as part of a new global effort to tackle the world's worst refugee crisis since World War II. And all of this was created by the United States and the coalition forces. Because look, do you think the people in Libya, with the U.S. now bombing in there, of course France is going to join in later on, UK will join in, NATO eventually will arrive, do you think the people are going to stay in this country? Most likely not. They're going to leave. Who wants to stay in an area where there is constant war? And this is what we're seeing in Iraq. This is what we're seeing in Syria. This is what we're seeing in Lebanon, Sudan, Yemen, Libya. Where's the United States? In each one of these countries, causing chaos and war. For what? To prop up the petrodollar. That's it. That's the reason we're in all of these areas, and this is the reason why they're continually trying to move into more and more countries. But as we can see, the U.S. is losing control very, very quickly. We see the U.S. Secretary of State, John Kerry, well, he's going to be making a stop in Turkey in late August to discuss what happened with the coup and talk to Erdogan about what happened with the coup. And we'll have to watch that situation very carefully. Turkey right now, they issued a formal arrest warrant for Gulen, and it came out of the Istanbul-based court. And right now, the United States is not handing him over. They're keeping him. And I don't know if the United States at this point will actually hand Gulen over to Turkey, because the goal in Turkey is to remove Erdogan at this point, as we can see. And the goal in the Middle East is to start a war. So I think this is the furthest from their agenda right now. And I believe right now they're going to continually push their agenda in this entire region. And we can see that the U.S., they are bombing in Libya. Now, Obama says they're going to be bombing in this area for 30 days. So at the Pentagon press briefing on Monday, Nancy Youssef asked a question. What gives you the authorization to go into Libya? And Cook responded that they're still using the authorization for use of military force, which was passed during 9/11. So it's 15 years old right now. And when you look at the AUMF resolution, it authorizes the United States to go into countries where Al-Qaeda is. and to fight them, not the Islamic State. And this is what the United States is doing in Libya. And it really doesn't pertain to the Islamic State. Now, we know there's another authorization for war pending in Congress where they can go after Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, Boko Haram, or any other terrorist group that is not named in the document, but they never got any traction, so they're using this old one right now. And the old Wars Power Resolution allows the president to go in and bomb or do whatever he has to do for 180 days. And we can see in Syria, well, 180 days have passed. In Iraq, 180 days have passed. Congress hasn't voted on anything. The president is just doing whatever he wants. And if we think the bombing is going to end in 30 days, there's no way. Because they need to take control of the Middle East. They've lost control of the Middle East. Ashton Carter even admitted it. He told troops at Fort Bragg, we will be going into each and every one of these countries to take back control. And this is what we're seeing right now. And this is not going to end. This is going to escalate as we move throughout the month of August. We're going to see more bombings. We're going to see war heat up. We're going to see more troops head over to the Middle East. You'll hear announcements coming from the White House that we need to send more advisors now to Libya. We need a special ops team inside of Libya to help out. And this will continue on. Because what they want is war now. And they're trying to get it. Either they take control of the entire situation or we go to war. And at the same time, while they're trying to take over the entire Middle East, war is going to come out of this. Now, out in Syria, we can see that the propaganda is all over the place. And we can see that they're mentioning chemical weapons, they're mentioning napalm. But here are some facts that we need to remember. President Assad, he has a higher approval rating than Barack Obama. The people in his country see him as a war hero. He brought in Russia, they're removing the terrorists. And we have to remember the United States, they don't have permission to be inside Syria. Assad has never used chemical weapons on his own people. A UN investigation into the first major chemical weapons attack committed in early of 2013 concluded that the attack came from the Syrian opposition. Now that was backed up because when the Syrian armed forces and the UN team looked into the caves where the Syrian opposition were, they found the sarin gas canisters. A subsequent UN investigation in August of 2013 attack never laid blame on anyone, including Assad's forces. Because, as we can see, every time there's a chemical attack, it's coming from the terrorists. The terrorists are beheading children. The terrorists are torturing people. The terrorists are using chemicals on the people of Syria because the terrorists have no link to the people. They're paid mercenaries. And it would make no sense for Assad to kill his own people to get rid of terrorists. And I've said this before, it's like George Washington and his forces turning around and destroying a village. It makes no sense. And we can see that the whole plan was to topple the Syrian government. And four-star General Wesley Clark laid this out shortly after 9/11. We're going to be going into Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Iran. Last two countries, Syria and Iran. We have to remember Iran and Syria, they have mutual defense agreements with each other. Since 2005, Iran and Syria, they're bound by a mutual defense agreement. And Iran has honored the agreement. They provided them with weapons, they provided them with troops, $1 billion credit line, training advisement. And strangely enough, Russia, China, they have sided with Iran and Syria, not the United States. They know what's going on there. Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they wanted to build a pipeline through Syria, but Assad rejected it. In 2009, this is when it happened. Qatar said, listen, we'd like to place a pipeline through Syria, go through Turkey, to export Saudi gas to Europe. Assad said, you know something? I don't want to do that. I'm going to make an agreement with Iran and Iraq to construct a pipeline to the European markets. Well, guess what? The United States said absolutely not. Saudi Arabia said absolutely not. And we had the war break out. And we can see right now that all the information that comes out of Syria, everything, it's coming out from a t-shirt shop in Coventry, England. Now, this is not a joke. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, SOHR, is run by one man in his home, thousands of miles away from the Syrian conflict, yet is quoted by most respected Western media outlets, the BBC, Reuters, The Guardian, International Business Times. His credentials include his ownership of a t-shirt shop just down the road. He's also a notorious dissident against the current Syrian president. And this is where the US, the UK, and the rest get all their information. And they spread it out in the corporate media. Now, we understand there was a chemical weapon attack inside Syria. We know that this attack came from the terrorist groups. Now, what's very interesting about all of this is that whenever there was a chemical attack, the United States went crazy. The corporate media went crazy for it. It's Assad. Look what he's doing. He's going to cross the red line. Once he crosses the red line, we're going to go in there because he's using chemical weapons. When it's found out that it's the terrorists that use the chemical weapons, guess what? The State Department, they say nothing. They brush it off. They pretend like it's not even important. Reporters are asking questions. Is it the terrorist groups or the moderate rebels that are using this? Well, we have no information of this. We have no idea. But as soon as it was Assad, they had no proof whatsoever, but told everyone they had the proof, but never could provide it. Yes, they had pictures of people suffering, but that is not proof. That is what happens afterwards. They didn't show the link of Assad doing it. Now, back a couple months ago, John Kerry came out and said that the U.S., the moderate rebels, they're going to take a different track if Assad is not removed on the 1st of August. And we're actually seeing this. Because August 1st, exactly the same date Kerry had set starting date for the very different track, the U.S. had prepared for an escalation and extension of the war on Syria. In December and January, ships under U.S. controls transported at least 3,000 tons of old weapons and ammunition from Bulgaria to Turkey and Jordan. These came atop hundreds of tons of weapons from Montenegro, transported via air to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. According to the information we have right now, about 8,000 al-Nusra militants have concentrated to the southwest of Aleppo. Up to 1,500 militants have gathered to the north of the city. And they've been planning this for months. So Kerry's very different track fits right into what is going on right now. And the attack started on Sunday, and by Monday the 2nd, we see that the attack failed. The plan did not work out in Aleppo whatsoever. They failed to achieve the desired aim. Now, most likely the coup was supposed to get Erdogan out of power. They were going to be able to have the forces in Turkey maybe come down from that direction, but the whole thing was completely messed up. And we can see right now what has happened since August 1st. They tried this attack in Syria, in Aleppo. It completely failed. They're bombing now in Libya, and we're not even done yet. Most likely, they're going to be going to plan, what are they on, Plan Z now? And as the U.S. continually loses, because you have to remember, the United States government central bankers, they're not gods. Most of them are imbeciles. Every plan they have seems not to work out, or Putin is one step ahead of them. So what happens to these individuals that don't get their way? Well, they're going to stamp their feet, they're going to slam their fists down, and they're going to do something stupid. And the stupid thing is some type of an event. They will go that route. They will go to that extreme to get their way. If it ends up in war, they don't care. So what are we seeing? We're seeing the economy deteriorate and collapse. We're seeing provocations in the South Pacific against North Korea and China. We see Ukraine heading towards war. NATO provoking Russia. We see the Middle East, the United States is all over the place bombing everyone. Troops everywhere. And then we have the elections. The elections coming up this November. And we know there's a candidate that the U.S. government, the central bankers, the shadow government, they all want. And there's another candidate where they just want to get rid of that person. And we understand something might occur during this time if it's not going their way. Now, we talked about some type of an event. Just a couple reports ago, we talked about the new 6 schema alert system that the U.S. government is going to use and what they consider critical infrastructure. And they laid it out because we can expect a cyber attack. But very interestingly, they're going to include the election systems. They're going to be treated as critical infrastructure. So if there is a cyber attack on the electronic election systems, which they don't even have to prove, by the way, they'll just tell everyone there is, they will look at how bad it's hit, what level we're at, and that might even postpone the election. So what do we have here? We have the election systems included with the critical infrastructure. They can use this to postpone the elections. Actually, they can declare a state of emergency with this. We also have maybe the Zika virus, where they can say, okay, we have an outbreak here. We can't get this under control. CDC can come up with their model saying millions of people are infected. This is what's going to happen. We have to vaccinate everyone. There has to be total lockdown. They can go that route. Or there could be some type of physical attack. And even if none of this happens, let's say, because they think they have it under control, they think they have the person they want, and the other person gets into office, and you know who I'm talking about, Trump, most likely something will happen at that point. So this is what we're watching here. Because as we can see from the indicators that we see, what is happening in the Middle East now, this is like a perfect storm coming all together. And it is going to be a complete and utter disaster. It will not cover up, it will not stop, I should say, the economic collapse. It will just make everyone look in a different direction. But everything that's happening is because the economy cannot be sustained. They want to go to war. They want people they can control. They want Syria. They want Iran. They want to manipulate the elections. They want to manipulate the economy. They want the people to take the losses They take the gains. They want rules for the everyday person and no rules for them. They love this country. Of course they do. Because they're playing on a completely different playing field than what we're playing on. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.